Let's get ready to rumble!
Hello and welcome to Netflix vs. Cinema, the podcast that this week is wondering whether we have done something a little bit illegal in the last week. Anyway, my name is Tosin. I am your host. I'm based up in Coventry in the Midlands, and joining me on the Isle of Wight are Sharon.
Hello.
And Shaun.
Hiya.
Yes, and you're joining us in a week in which the cinema part of Netflix vs. Cinema is well and truly back. So, what we usually do on this show is that we go to the cinema, we see usually three films. We stay at home, we see three things at home on Netflix and various streaming platforms. We rate them all out of 5, and then we come up to the end and we say, where has our money been better spent this week? Which one gave us more bang for our buck? And after last week, in which we were worried that would be it, we would not be allowed back in cinemas, that cinemas were going to get shut down because of tightening lockdown restrictions, and also nobody releasing any new films because of Tenet. This week, all of a sudden, there's quite a few new films. It almost feels like a normal cinema week. Wouldn't you guys say that?
Yeah,
I would say so.
I'm having like one release every fortnight or so. We suddenly had like 3 or 4 brand new films.
I know.
So it was just like, oh, there's something to choose from.
Yeah, it's quite interesting though, because they're not your big blockbusters, are they? They're not like your Hollywood things. They're very much small, independent type films.
Yeah, because I think people have been keeping an eye. They've been keeping an eye on the takings for Tenet to see what it's like. So apparently Tenet was always going to be a guinea pig. It was always going to be put it out there, the first canary down the mine, and figure out how it goes. And if it makes loads of money, then everyone is going to go all gung-ho and start releasing stuff. And apparently Tenet's takings have been down. Internationally, it's doing quite well, but in America, which is apparently the only place that matters, in America, apparently they're lower than what they expected them to be. So there's a few there's a few big movies which are pushing themselves back, because I think they think if they spend so much money, they need so many people to see it in a certain amount of time for them to make their money back.
Yeah.
But I think the smaller film, this might be the age for the smaller film, because they don't spend that much money on it. They don't have to have that many people see it in the cinema to make their money back. And to be honest with you, I'm kind of okay with that.
Yeah. I was reading an article the other day about the biggest cinema failures, and they describe a film as a failure as obviously its box office doesn't equate to its production cost plus its publicity costs.
Yeah.
And so a film could cost £100 million to make, but they may also spend £100 million on publicity. So they can eat their publicity budget can equal its production costs. So you then have a £200 million film, and so to make money, they have to then make 250 plus million pounds to make it worth its while. And so they had all this list of films basically where they'd made the biggest losses, from anything from like a few, like 50 million is like a small loss, to a colossal, $300 million losses.
Nearly bankrupt. There's sort of some films that are bankrupted, haven't they? I mean,
Heaven's Gate.
Yeah, Heaven's Gate was one.
What was there's the pirate one that is quite notorious.
Cutthroat Island.
Cutthroat Island,
yeah. That was like a big flop. And I think
John
way
Carter
back
of Mars, I think was a recent one.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was a 200 million loss, which is
But there's some of them. Yeah, but there's some films I didn't think they were that bad, and I thought they did quite well. And when you look at the box office, they did take, £100 million or $100 million, whatever. They did make money, but they just didn't make enough money.
Yeah, they just spent a lot of it on it. Shaun, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, there was there used to be a film producer called Samuel Bronstein, and he used to do films like real sword and sandal epics, like Ben-Hur and all those. Yeah. And the last film he made was a film called The Fall of the Roman Empire.
Oh yeah.
Yes, I know it. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and it totally bombed, and more or less it bankrupted him because he put so much money into it.
It's a very long film, though, isn't it?
It's about 60s. Yeah, it's a huge film, early 60s film. But Samuel Bronstein, famous for sword and sandal epics, and that sort of killed it. The Fall of the Roman Empire killed it. But I've seen it a couple of times, and
I've seen it. Yeah, it's long, but I quite liked it.
Yeah, I didn't mind it too much. Although I must say, sometimes you do know. It's funny, sort of some films age, because you see with like when the horses are galloping, you can sort of see it's not like real ground. It's obviously there's like, because it's obviously like a carpet of sand or something, and it's sort of you know, as the horses go, you can see it's you know, it's obviously obviously done in a studio, a lot of it, you know.
Shaun's thing of watching the background and going, that isn't real. That's a wobbly cardboard wall.
Yeah, that's what I found about. That's what I really, really hated about the Spider-Man. Was it 3? The one with Electro, the one with James
that was the Amazing Spider-Man 2.
The Amazing Spider-Man 2. You see now, when it was in Times Square, to me that whole thing looked like a set, like a film set. I just could not believe that was Times Square, because all this stuff was falling and getting destroyed, and yet I was just thinking, oh, that just looks like a wooden frame with, you know, a bit of sort of backing on it. Yeah.
So while Shaun was looking at the rubbish in the background, I was watching that film, looking at the rubbish in the foreground. I was distracted. I was distracted.
And I didn't bother watching it at all.
You did miss a lot.
Okay, we'll get into films now. We'll get into films this week, and so I mentioned that we may or may not have done something illegal. So Shaun managed to actually catch Mulan this week, which obviously Mulan is one of those films that we're talking about that is, they spent a lot of money on it, and they seem to think we're not going to recoup this in the cinemas, so it has not been allowed to go to cinemas, and it has gone in I think it's going to be in cinemas in some areas of the world, but definitely in America and here, it's on Disney Plus. That's the only way we can see it. And I know a friend of the show, Yatish, was he? Yeah, Yatish. He got in touch with me and he was like, "Have you seen Mulan yet?" Because he's like a big martial arts guy, so he was comparing it to all these different, like, you know, martial arts movies and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, "Oh no, I haven't seen it," because I do have Disney Plus. Well, my brother has Disney Plus, and I can watch it over at his place. Yes, I only ever watch Disney Plus when I go to my brother's house. Yeah, so I asked him about that. He was like, you know what, this thing is going to be on normal Disney, like later on in November, and Disney have enough money. I refuse to give them an extra £20, which I'm like, I can totally understand. So we'll probably talk a little bit about Mulan next week, once we figured out, like, you know, what is this Shaun saw. We'll probably talk about that a little bit more next week. But this week, cinemas, as I said, we actually had a selection. We managed to see 3 films in the cinema, and there were more that we could have seen if it had come up. So I think first things first. Hang on, there was something we were saying before we were recording. Did one of you say something that I said, no, wait, save it for the recording when we're talking about what films?
Yes, there was a film that was released that I looked at and went, hell no.
Oh yes.
That's it, yes.
Oh, yes. That was it. Sharon, would you like to tell us what this film was and why?
Yeah, there was a film that was released called After We Collide, or After We Collided. I'm not sure what the tense is. And it is a sequel to a film called After, that I reviewed for the show last year, maybe the year before. As a Netflix film, and I absolutely hated it. Before the horror show that was Rambo: Last Blood, that was my lowest rated film that I've ever reviewed.
I do remember. It was okay. So I'm looking at our records. It was a show that we recorded on the 17th of what? 17th of that's July. 17th of July in 2019. And up until that point, Sharon was like, you know, the nice, like, you know, smiley one, the optimistic one. Is like, oh, they made a film. Let's give them a thumbs up for making a film.
Yes, well done.
Yeah, and every now and then
this one.
Yes, each one of us has a film that just makes us go no, and this was Sharon's no.
Yeah.
So if you want to listen to that,
before there was Rambo, there was this after. And the reason I detested it so much was it's basically a film that entirely defined this young woman by her relationship to her boyfriend. After was like after this relationship. So the fact that she was in university, that she'd achieved a lot, that she had ambitions, that she had a life of an identity, suddenly she's reduced to life was like, oh, before this boyfriend, after this boyfriend. And it was just turgid rubbish. I was
so
not
good when we see
going...
Sharon like this. I
was
love
not
this
going
Sharon.
to watch after we collided, because I just think I am not going to waste any more of my time on her lamenting about this drippy boy that she fancied when she was a teenager. It was just like, no, it's not going to happen.
Okay,
Sharon is like really, really serious. You can see we don't see often Sharon like this.
If you're only listening to the audio version of this podcast, because now we started releasing the video version on Facebook as well. If you only listen to the audio version of this podcast, I'm not sure which you would. I'm not sure which one of these I'm finding more hilarious. Either the look of absolute just anger and disgust on Sharon's face, or the look of delight on Shaun's face, and the look of anger on Sharon's face. I am not sure which one.
No. It's just like, do they seriously intend to like put back, not sort of feminism, because I don't think it has that much value that it could challenge anything, but it was just like, for a generation of girls who want to watch films about themselves, about their generation, it's like, is this the best you can do, that you are as a woman defined by a failed relationship? No, get over it and don't ever watch that film.
Yeah.
Okay, now I could sit down and listen to Sharon complain about After for an hour, easy. I could totally do that. But we should probably go into some films we did watch this week. So the films, I didn't realize that was a sequel. I did, but I want to go see it now and just come back and join Sharon on her angry perch. Okay. So first up this week, we are going to talk about Bill and Ted Face the Music. So this is as you can tell, it's a sequel to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. So a film in which we meet Bill and Ted years later. That's Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter, and this time they're middle-aged, they have children themselves, and it's all about catching up with them later in life. So Sharon, you and I both saw this. Is there anything that you want to say a little bit about the setup of Bill and Ted Face the Music?
Yeah, well, anyone who knows the Bill and Ted story, basically their destiny as a wild stallions, whatever they have to do, is that their destiny is that they are going to unite the world, and they are going to save the world by writing the perfect pop song, a bit like Tenacious D in their famous music video of the greatest rock song in the world.
Yeah. Tribute.
They have their tribute. That's it. Their destiny is to write have this moment, write this song. And it's 25 years later and they still haven't written it. And time is running out, and they have been told, look, you've got like 2 hours, you've got to write this song in the next 2 hours, or reality as we know it will implode upon itself, and we're all doomed. And so they then set out on this mission, as only Bill and Ted can, to see if they can get this song. They think if we just go skip far enough into the future, surely we'll have written it by then, and we can then just take the completed song and then come back and release it in this complicated like timelines that they do. And so you just see them on a series of adventures where they try to go forward in time. Meanwhile, their daughters, who are sort of aware of what's going on, decide, hey, what if we help our fathers by getting the greatest rock band in the world? So they go back in time to get some of the key people in musical history. And so you have got these sort of colliding timelines, and then they go to hell and they come back again, and they go to the future. Yes, it's Bill and Ted.
And it is, and it's funny that that you say that your summary is that, well, it's Bill and Ted, because I feel this is a kind of film that I know, personally speaking, I was never as what's the word? I was never as sort of like reverential of the first two Bill and Ted movies as a lot of people are. I was never like, oh my god, it's so good, it's the most amazing thing. That was never me. I sort of appreciated them and all that kind of stuff. For ages, I used to think, okay, well, that's Ken Reeves' best performance, because I think he might just be playing himself. So so that was my thing with Bill and Ted. And so coming to this film, I feel like it has a lot. I had to feel like this film has a lot for Bill and Ted fans. So people who love the first two, because this film is, and makes no bones about it, it's not trying to do anything new. It is just a massive nostalgia trip. It's kind of like, let's go hang out with these guys who you probably love for 2 hours. Let's go hang out with them. Let's go see what. So the plot of the film is almost there's two plots. There's their daughters going out, let's help our dads by going around the world or going through time and picking up the most amazing musicians to help them tell them record this song, greatest song ever. So they go to the 60s and find Jimi Hendrix. They go to the 20s and they find Louis Armstrong. They go to Vienna and find Mozart. They go around the world. They go to China. They go even further back and they go get the best drummer ever, or the person who invented drumming from a North African tribe. And so that bit is very much the plot of the first film. That's very much the plot of the first one, going through trying to get all these historical figures for the greatest history project ever. And then the other bit of Bill and Ted going through time and meeting loads of alternate versions of themselves, because they're like, have you written the song yet? No. Have you written the song yet? We've got to go further forward in time. Have you written the song now? That bit is very much it's the second film. And obviously they go to hell, which is very much the second film. But so there is a rehash of a lot of the things that they have already done before in Bill and Ted. Which I think some people will be okay with. I mean, I was sitting out there not being a massive Bill and Ted fan of the first two. I was like, going, okay, I see what they're doing here. Okay, cool, no problem. And I didn't mind it. I didn't mind that they were doing a rehash because, quite frankly, I think you could see Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter just loving.
Yeah, just having a ball.
Yeah, just having a ball, doing it again. I didn't mind it. The film was exactly what I expected it to be. It was a middle of the road 3 out of 5. It was nothing particularly world beating. It was exactly what I expected it to be. I mean, there was great fun seeing William Sadler back as Death. I think William Sadler as Death is brilliant. And I have to say, when it comes to performances in this film, I have to give props, because obviously they have daughters. And there's the whole thing where Ted has named his daughter Wilhelmina, Bill. So Billy,
yeah.
And Bill has named his daughter Theodora. So they've named their daughters after each other. So, and Bridget Lundy Payne, who plays Billy, so Ted's daughter, she is brilliant. She's pretty much doing a Keanu Reeves impression for the entire film, and not the voice or anything, but the mannerisms, everything like that. I'm like, oh my, she is absolutely nailing Keanu Reeves. It is actually, it was a sight to behold, quite frankly, because the way she was going, whoa, Uncle Bill. And I was just like, good Lord, she's nailing him. She is absolutely. And Samara Weaving as Thea, I don't think she comes across a bit more like, your typical airhead valley girl, wouldn't be out of place in Clueless, that kind of stuff. So I didn't think it was because I know Samara Weaving. I mean, I love her. I mean, Shaun, remember her in what's the name of that? Ready or Not.
Oh yeah. Ready or Not. Yep.
Yeah, I think Samara Weaving is brilliant. But she in this, I feel like there isn't much to that character. But the Billy character, was it? No, let's see. So the Billy character, I thought that it gets confusing. It gets confusing. I think she nailed Keanu Reeves. Yes.
I have a confession to make. I haven't really seen the Bill and Ted films.
I'm not surprised.
Never seen them, so I'm not invested in it. So it's not like something I would rush to go and see. I mean, I probably would see it just for something to see, but it's not really. I mean, I'm aware of them, and I'm, the bits like the Wild Stallions and Death and all that, but I've never actually seen them.
Yeah.
Go through.
I think I'm more conversant with the second one, with the Bogus Journey, than Excellent Adventure. So
I know Excellent Adventure better. That's the one I've seen several times, and I've only seen, I think, Bogus Journey once.
All right. So I mean, somebody who we interviewed on this show, Karen Bagshaw, she was one of our interviews during the lockdown period. She said that this was her film that she was most looking forward to seeing back in cinema. So as someone who is really, really au fait with the first Bill and Ted movie, Sharon, what did you think?
Yes, I liked it. I mean, for me, it's all about Bill and Ted for me. Not so much about the two daughters. I thought that was an interesting sideline, but it felt a little bit like it was padding. But I really did enjoy seeing the different sort of incarnations of Bill and Ted as they go forward. And
that's funny, yeah.
There's certain reveal moments where it's just funny. That worked for me in terms of that nostalgic, going back to my youth when Bill and Ted was first out. So yeah, I thought that was fun. But yeah, I was less interested in the two girls. Though yeah, they did their roles well. But it was nice to see that they've got a lot of the original cast left, the ones that are still alive, obviously.
Yeah,
but yeah, they had like Bill's dad. They had the babysitter that has married everyone. And they've had a lot of some of the time traveler people. So they've got as many people back as they possibly could have. So I just thought that was, it was a ride as far as that was concerned.
Yes, yeah. And also the way Bill and Ted movies tend to be, they are silly for most of the runtime. Then right at the end, they come together with this philosophical point that they leave you with, and they go, "Yeah, be excellent," and then they go off. So how many stars?
I would give it a 3 stars still. I think, yes, it's more for the fans of the Bill and Ted world than the casual observer. You could watch it and enjoy it because you could, it's not a complicated story.
Yeah.
So, but I would still give it a 3. I think, it's fun, it's entertaining, but yes, it doesn't stretch you more than that.
Yeah. And talking about bringing the cast back, Bill and Ted's wives, the princesses, who were never a big part of the story, but they did recast them with more recognizable actresses. They did recast them, and there's a bit of me that's wondering why. Anyway, it's essentially, how you went off on one about, and you don't particularly go off on one often about women's issues and women being portrayed in film, unless it's after.
No. Yeah.
Unless it's after, then you really go, no, this is the nadir. There was a bit of this. I was thinking, why didn't they bring them back?
They look a bit too middle-aged. They've aged.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, they haven't been in the pub spotlight. Have they not remained princess shaped in sort of inverted commas? So I was like, it's a thorny one, but
yes,
see more
that's
about
the biggest sin that a female actress can commit is getting older, isn't it? And looking it. It's fine if you get older and then you work the gym twice a week and you
Bridget Fonda
put the work in.
Or you Bridget Fonda in and spend £20,000 on plastic surgery, which she actually attributes with prolonging her career another 20 years.
Well, yeah, that's probably true. I mean, but then Jane was she was like the figurehead of go for the burn and work out to stay young, and yet it didn't actually work for her.
All right, cool.
But so age does catch up. So yes, maybe that was a little bit of a.
It was a little bit. I was like, they don't look princess shape. They don't look princessy anymore. But anyway, we'll see. I'll have to go do some research. But now. Okay, that's cinema kicking off, and now we're going to go over to home, Netflix, and this is a film that, Shaun, you said you missed when it first came out in cinema the first time, and you might have to catch it up this time, and this is Black Death. Black Death, yeah. This was I saw this on Netflix. As I say, it must have had a similar, not a very wide cinema release, because I think I would have recognised this. But basically, Black Death is a story of the Black Death, I guess, the plague, and it's the sort of group of mercenaries. There's this village where the plague hasn't hit yet, and so they have to go on a quest, but they need a like a guide. So there's this monk that played by Eddie Redmayne. All the normal characters. Anyway, so this group of mercenaries, they go to this village that hasn't been affected by the plague. So the first part of the movie is they're sort of. I guess it's mid 1350s, 1360s, something like that, 1300s. Yeah, they're marching
Black
through.
Death was 1345.
1345. Yeah, I thought it must have been around about that. So they march through, and there's some really, really great scenes about you can imagine the Black Death. There's pestilence. There's people being carried out. There's people with the masks. It's all very very nasty. It's all very now. It's all very now. Yes, it's all very now. And talking about now, what's really funny. The leader of the mercenaries is good old Sean Bean. Now, Sean Bean in this looks just like he's come out of Boromir. He's got the same sort of gear as Boromir. Looks totally the same. And the mercenaries that are with him, I think it's quite a good little map, because they're not like good lookers like
Aragorn and all them. They're pretty tough characters, but they're not particularly horrible characters either. They're not particularly ugly. And there's a few good fight scenes in it. And then they get to the village, and there's like I guess you call her a witch. So they get sort of captured, and also anyway, that's basically the adventure. And then there's a good twist at the end, because Sharon, you've seen it, so if you remember the twist. So but to me this was I don't know what I could think about this film, because it started off really, really good. I had a few issues with it. I think that when they would have gone into the village, they would have been a bit more on their guard than what they were. To me, they'd gone there for a specific purpose, to find out what was going on, and yet they sort of were in the village. They were taking part, and to me, I don't think they'd have let their guard down quite so much as they did. So, but it's a pretty solid film. There's a few good action scenes, and I think it's very more Lord of the Rings-ish than what I would class as proper medieval stuff. Some of the weapons were a little bit elaborated, like serrated swords, and they had this this like Iron Maiden thing with lots of nasty bits. So,
and this guy showed up with a machine gun.
Yeah, that type of thing. Like, oh, that's an interesting weapon. I've never seen one like that. Don't even know how they would possibly have made that in the 1300s. It's such a weird shape with lots of nice intricate little bits and bobs, that how the hell would they have made that? They'd have just made a massive big broadsword, So but it was generally on the whole, it was pretty good. Sharon, I don't know if you remember much about it, because I guess it was, what year would it have been? Sort of 10 years ago, something like that.
All of that, yes. I watched it at the time. I do remember it. I remember obviously the elements that they're going to this to find out. I know there's elements about the monk, and then there's elements about why this particular area has not been affected, and then certain things. I remember certain scenes. They have a scene where all the mercenaries. In my head, I thought he might have been a Templar knight or something like that, or he'd had something to do with the Templars, but maybe I'm wrong, because I'm not sure if it's the right time frame.
I don't think any of these were particularly paragons.
It is, because one of the things that you say about the films, the way you mention it, because there was a period of time where there was a British action medieval movie glut that happened in the wake of Lord of the Rings. I know that there is one that's about the Knights Templars defending like some castle. I think Shaun was watching.
That's brilliant. I've watched that. It's one of
Ironclad.
One of my favourite movies.
Yeah,
one of my favourite movies.
He was a Knight Templar in that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I know there was Ironclad, and I know that there was Black Death, and I know there were all these films that would have like maybe one really big recognizable star, and then you would surround them with a whole bunch of British character actors who usually get to play, that bad guy over there.
Bad guy number one.
Yeah, and
one does not simply walk into Mordor.
Yes, that kind of thing. And I think obviously they said that Eddie Redmayne. This was before Eddie Redmayne became Eddie Redmayne and could still do and was still doing British films. So it's I remember that there was a glut of them, and they sort of like came out and they would come into the cinema. They wouldn't do much. They're the kind of films that we're probably going to get in cinemas now, because they're going to be like, quick, there's no blockbuster around. We only spent $5 million. We can recoup that. If we're the only game in town, we can recoup $5 million. So it's So what did you think of the film then? Like, if you're going to give it a star rating?
If I was to give this a star rating, I'd say, it would be a 3-star. It would be, like you said, it would be probably one of those, films that were churned out, like, I don't know, what was it? There were some Roman ones at about the same time, weren't there? Like the Eagle and Centurion and all those.
Yeah.
And Centurions. Now, see, I really liked Centurions.
Centurion, that was a good film as well.
Yeah, Centurion was good. But it's pretty standard fare. There's nothing really new in it. And it's just like, a little, an adventure. It's like, I guess you could call it the Fellowship of the Rings, but it was the Fellowship of finding the village to find out what's going on. You know what I mean? So yeah, it looked straight out of Lord of the Rings to me.
Lord of the Rings with a little less money.
With a little less money, and try and do it. But the scenes at the beginning with the pestilence and was okay. But I would give this a solid 3 stars. So it'd be 3 stars. Nothing special, but not not really bad.
Yeah, I'm waiting for all the action movies they're going to make that set during COVID. There's
That's going to be strange, isn't it?
It's going to be strange, yeah. And you know that at the moment Zack Snyder's making a film. It's something of the dead. I think it's something of the dead, but I can't remember what the something is. But the whole idea is that there's a zombie apocalypse, and during that, some guys decide that everybody's left Las Vegas, but there's all this money that they've left in the casinos in Las Vegas, so they decide to go to Las Vegas during a zombie apocalypse and rob the banks, or rob the casinos.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds
that
good.
That would do them a lot of good in an apocalypse.
Well, we'll see. But I reckon that there's going to be things.
You need a lot of money in an apocalypse. No wonder.
Just the probably just the excitement of it. I expect. People wanting to be, the excitement of like, you can actually go and hold all this money, even though we probably can't do a lot with it.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, and now we go back to cinema and we talk about a film called Broken Hearts Gallery. Now, Sharon, seeing as you ran away from a film after for those reasons, this seems like it might have some of the similar pitfalls. So that's just my prejudice speaking with a title like Broken Hearts Gallery. So tell us, what's this about?
Yes, I mean, I tend to view this sort of film with a bit of suspicion, but I thought, well, I could almost guarantee that neither of you gentlemen would go to see this film. So I thought, I will go and see it.
I was actually planning, because for a while before I got the email saying Bill and Ted Face the Music was out, this was like the only thing I thought, well, maybe I've got to go see something. So I was planning to go see it, but then I ran out of time.
Yes, it could have easily it did have some of the tropes that you expect in some of these films, but it recognised that this was a trope that you would see in romantic comedies. So in some ways, it was aware that this was playing into the whole genre. The basic, I'll explain what that is in a second. The premise of this film is this young woman, she's in her mid to late 20s, she's 26, 27, and she's sort of got her dream job. She's working as an assistant curator in a swanky New York gallery. But even though she's sort of doing her dream job, she's still living in her student house with her 2 best friends, where she's basically got her own room and they're in this shared quite a small flat. And her relationships have basically been following the same pattern since she was at university. So the last sort of 10 years of her dating life, she's had like these relationships that have failed, and she's almost basically made a little shrine to that fallen relationship. And in her own space, she has this she charts the course of her life and the course of her relationships by the things that she gathers. And she's a compulsive collector of things. So like some of us, when we go to a theatre or we may go to a concert, we may keep our theatre tickets and go, that's a lovely memory. And some of my theatre tickets have become like bookmarks, and sometimes I think, do I really need to know that I went to this show in 1985? No, it's time to let that go. But she doesn't let that go. She keeps all of these things, and some of these things really random. Like it could be the candle holder from the restaurant that she's swiped, or it could be like a napkin, it could be a plastic fork. It's trivia, and it's stuff that on the surface of it has no meaning, but for her it sort of is mapping her life by these this stuff that she's accumulated. And she's just come at the end of this horrible relationship, and she's started to wear this guy's tie of her former boyfriend, and she's a bit down, and she gets horribly drunk at a very public event, and she loses her job. No spoiler, really, because it's right at the beginning. And she calls her Uber to come and pick her up, and she basically gets into this car and says, okay, take me to this place. And the guy says, no, get out of my car, I'm not your Uber driver, because she's so drunk she just doesn't register that he's saying. And so in the end he feels sorry for her, so he just take her home. And this is like the start of like their sort of relationship where they get to know each other. He runs into her again not by accident, later on we find out, and she has got so depressed over this relationship that she's taken to wearing this guy's tie. around her former boyfriend's time. And so to cut a long story short, the guy she meets is building his own hotel bit by bit in a very shoestring budget. And there's part of the hotel where he's showing her around, and she pins the tie to the wall and she scrawls next to it, this is on this day I broke up with Max, and this is like the symbol of my broken heart.
Yeah.
And then the next day he comes in and he sees that someone else has pinned a map to the wall saying, on this day, this was the mark the end of my relationship. And as word gets out, people begin dropping off things that symbolize their broken heart. And so what starts off as like this random thing becomes the start of a new passion in life. She's a museum curator, so she decides to curate these items, and she makes these videos of everyone who comes in with this item, and they say, okay, tell me the story of your item. And one of them is a lady with a cast from a broken leg cast with all the writing on it, and she says, I've kept this for 5 years. And then she talks about what it symbolizes her relationship, and by letting it go, it's a next step in healing of their journeys. So each item in the gallery has a story attached.
It sounds like this film is a bit of like, it's hoarders propaganda.
Oh yeah. But it absolutely is about sort of the significance of things. And but then as the story progresses, and I won't tell you why, there's a reason why she became a gatherer of these things, a collector of this minutiae. There's a reason for it, and you understand that reason later. So you can understand why it was hard for her to let go of some of this stuff. Okay. And for other people, they keep things that symbolize different parts of relationships of past days.
I've got to be honest with you, Sharon. You have intrigued me, and I do think that this does sound like a little bit. It sounds a cut above your usual sort of romantic comedy, which is what I expect this to be. So, yes. But you're the one who's seen it, and so you're the only one who can tell us whether it is actually a cut above. How many stars would you give it?
I would say yes, it was a cut above. It is aware of what romantic comedies do. It's aware of the different tropes. So there's certain scenes in it where you're thinking, yeah, you've watched while you were sleeping. You've watched all these other, but it's aware of that. So to me, I think nods to you for that. So I thought he was a cut above this standard, and I like the fact that she was like normal. To me, she looked normal. She was like, she wasn't super skinny, super fit, super glam. She looked like someone you would be friends with, and her friends were saying they're a bit kooky, but again, you think you can understand how these relations go. So to me, yeah, I thought it was a cut above the normal. I would give it a high 3. I don't think it quite goes up to a 4 but it to me it was a high 3. So if we gave half points, I'd give it a 3.5 or a 3.8. But to me, it's just short of that 4, sort of passing that threshold. So I'd say I really liked it. Didn't love it. I didn't think it was amazing, but I would say I really liked it. So I would give it a strong 3.
All right, cool. Seeing as
maybe.
Yeah, carry on, Shaun.
Maybe we should start doing decimal places just to make life more difficult for you. Although I'm sure you'd cope with it. But,
Shaun, I was just about to say, I was like, well, this pandemic is messing everything up. Why not? Why not? So yes, 3.5. 3.5 for Broken Hearts Gallery. That's it.
Yeah. It cut above your standard 3, but not
I really
quite
like
to the 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shaun, you were saying?
I mean, yes, I was just saying, I really enjoyed a film called 500 Days of Summer.
Oh, that is like my wife's favorite film. That is, yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Yeah. So this sounds like a film that perhaps I should watch it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So I might try and catch this one if there's not a lot else on.
Yeah. I think I probably will as well. All right, thank you, Sharon. And now we go back to Netflix and Friends. We go back home and something that we watched. And this is me. I watched something called The Australian Dream. So in the last couple of weeks, we've been commenting on the fact that we seem to just keep being drawn towards cinema from that area of the world, from Australia, New Zealand. We seem to keep going. And I seem to keep getting drawn towards films that make me think Australia is a terrible place I never want to go to. So...
Not all neighbours, is it?
Yeah, it really is. So, I mean, obviously, a couple of weeks ago, I saw Nightingale, which is all about what happened to the Aboriginal. Essentially, it starts off as one thing, and then it ends up being about what happened to the Aboriginal people when Europeans showed up in Australia, which is horrific. And the Australian Dream could be like, a sequel to that made 200 years later or whatever it is. Because it's a documentary. This was on BBC iPlayer. It's a documentary about an Aussie rules football player called Adam Goodes, who this was a massive story in Australia. It was a massive story in Australia. He is of Aboriginal descent. He says his dad was Irish. His or was it Scottish? I can't remember. Hence the Goods, and his mum was from one of the Aboriginal tribes, and he was playing in the football league in a game, and it was in a big game. At the beginning of the league, they have this thing called the Aboriginal round, which honors Aboriginal culture and honors the fact that these people were here before anybody else, and it seeks to do that, and in some way, and that's the whole idea behind it. And he was playing in this, and when he was playing, he had somebody hurl a racial insult at him, and he had someone here racial insult, and he immediately just went and because this guy was like the biggest name. It was kind of like the Ronaldo of Australian rules football. Like everybody said, this guy is the best player ever. He is amazing. He's won the best player of the year like twice, which nobody does. And so somebody yells at him, and he just sort of like turns and he just points at the person, and there's this sort of like almost iconic picture that the whole thing picks up. I know nothing about Australian rules football, and immediately this picture is iconic to me, which is him standing there pointing at the stands and saying something, and he essentially just points and he yells at the stewards. They just called me this. They just called me. Essentially they called him an effing ape, and he goes, I want them out. Then after he points, like he's like, I want them out. He realizes that it's a 13-year-old girl who said that to him. So, but he still goes, no. He's like, no, look, racism is racism. And so she goes out, and it becomes this whole thing, and it's like one of these. It's quite a poetic film because this was written and this documentary was put together by a writer who is of Aboriginal descent, and he's like, he's a journalist and you can see from the beginning, from the word go, there's this lyrical theme to the film, and he talks about how sports has a habit of going to the heart of a nation, and this whole incident just reveals what people really hold important, because after a while, this guy says, I was racially abused, and a large part of the country turns on him. And they turn on him and they say, how dare you do that? What the hell's wrong with you? There's people going on TV and they're just sort of commentating and like absolutely out in the open, going against this guy. And he comes across as quite a reasoned, trying to make his point, measured, everything like that. And he gets to the point where every single game he goes to, there's just booing. People just boo him constantly for the entire match. They just boo the guy. And it makes you think, oh my God, Australia is a really, really bad place, and Australia has some real racial problems that are not put to the fore. But I think it's a brilliant film. I think one of my friends who lives in Australia, Jenny Austin, she's English, but she works out there, and she says that her company last year, when this was released in 2019, actually paid for everybody in the company to go watch this film, because they were like, this is a real key important film for us in Australia, for what we have to do and for how far we have to go in Australia. I thought it was brilliant. I thought the way they put it together, obviously the people who put the film thought that he was in the right and all the people who were arguing against him were in the wrong. And I personally find it hard to think how you could have come to go to any other, because there's a scene where, so imagine something like A Question of Sport, like a TV show like A Question of Sport, or Match of the Day, or something like that. And they go about the history of racism in Australian women's football. And there was a player called Nicky Wingard, who in the 80s, he was being abused because he was one of two Aboriginal players on the field. And he has this iconic picture. And they say in Australia, it's the equivalent of, the Black Power salute at the 1968 Olympics? It's the equivalent it's the equivalent of that, where he's essentially standing there in front of this thousands of people, and he lifts up his shirt and points at his skin to say, like, look, this is me, this is my color, and I'm proud. The way he says, I'm black and I'm proud. And so because of everything that comes to him from that, he doesn't go on a TV show. And there's a scene where one of the hosts of this show, so imagine it's Match of the Day, and imagine Gary Lineker. Yeah, imagine Gary Lineker goes off screen and comes back off with shoe polish on his face. and says, well, he wouldn't come on our show, so don't worry, just interview me. This is me. I'm him. This was on national television in Australia, and they thought it was okay. They thought it was okay. I mean, I was watching this thing, and I was like, I cannot believe what I am watching. I cannot believe what I am watching. So I think it's brilliant. I think everybody, I'll say I think everybody should watch it. Obviously, have skin in the game. In the game. I think it's brilliant. I think it's a 4 out of 5. It is very. I think it's a documentary that you can see is very. It's a constructed documentary. These people have constructed this thing for maximum lyrical, poetic bash, and that's why it's called the Australian Dream, because there's a bit where the journalist Stan something, I can't remember. Yeah, the journalist, he talks about the Australian Dream, and he says that once we heard people booing Adam Goodes, we in the Aboriginal community, we heard the sound of the Australian Dream, and it says, you are not welcome. And it is such a good film. I absolutely loved it, and I would recommend go find it on BBC iPlayer before it disappears.
On iPlayer.
Yeah. It might make you hate Australia, but it's a good film. So, all right, cool. And now
how many stars?
4 stars. Yeah.
Oh, you gave it a 4 stars.
Yeah, it's a 4. It's a Dyed in War 4. It would be, quite frankly, it would be a 5. It wasn't for the fact that towards the end, I feel like it starts becoming a bit contrived, and you can see almost like this is the point we're trying to make, and we're going to hammer it home. And it becomes less about I feel like it becomes less about the football player who everything happened to, and more about the journalist who wants to tell this story.
Right.
So if not, it would be a Dyed in War 5. But it's a brilliant film. All right, cool. And now we go back to cinemas, and we talking about films that were made in that area of the world. Savage. Yeah. So
Savage, yes. Yeah, Savage. This is. I went to see this movie. I was intrigued by it. It's basically a film about New Zealand gangs, and the gang culture in New Zealand.
Yep.
It starts off with this character, and he's called Savage, and he's a member of this sort of like almost like Hell's. I guess you call them Hell's Angels. They got like the colours.
Yeah.
They're actually called Savages, But you got this one guy who's got tattoos on his face, and it starts off. He's what you call a sergeant of the gang. He's like the, I guess you'd call him any trouble. He's the one that sorts it out. You know, he's a sort of nasty one. So there's this scene at the very beginning where he calls one of the members in and says, you know, if you're out of order and all that, and he does something pretty violent with a hammer. It doesn't kill him, but it's that hence being an 18. So, and then it's the story. So that's how it sort of starts off, and then it flashes back to his childhood, and he comes from a fairly big family, and his father's a bit abusive, you know, physically abusive to the family, and he sort of protects the family in a little way, but he loves his mother. His mother's really, you know, obviously really likes and cares for him, but it's just got this domineering father. Anyway, he decides to go out to, he calls a bit, he wants to get some food, so he breaks into a place, he gets caught, he ends up going to this Borstal, and there's some, shall we say, a few predatory officials that aren't particularly nice to him, but he makes friends with this funny enough, a Maori boy called Moses, and they sort of form an affinity, and they attack one of the guards, and anyway, and then so you've got that story of his formative years, and then he comes out and they decide to form this little gang. But when he comes out, he keeps going home, and he never actually goes to see his family, but he puts a little notch on the post wherever he goes to see him once every year. And so then it goes to like teenage time, 1970s, and his brother, he's got his older brother he got on really well with earlier on, who's in another gang, and he's torn between the two. So there's a big incident between the two gangs, and he ends up becoming this savage thing, and then it goes on to later days really, where he's trying to find a little bit of redemption, I guess. So and although he's quite a nasty, mean character, he's still got a little bit of humanity there. He's got a little bit of humanity that will, you know, that
you hope will redeem him.
You can see it there because he you know, there's like a young gang member that gets a bit bullied and all that, but he sort of helps him, takes him under, you know, protects him through as much as he can without trying to seem weak, you know.
Yeah.
And then there's a bit of conflict between Moses, and he says, you know, he says, if you don't want to be the sergeant, I'm not, I'm never ever going to speak to you again, and all that. So you've got all this sort of conflict, So yeah, it's a really thought-provoking story, and I thought, yeah, really, really quite thought-provoking. It wasn't what I expected. I was expecting it to be quite sort of gangy violence, and although that is in there, there's a lot of what should we say? A lot of, you can understand coming from the family he did and the background, and then going to Borstal, how he became what he was, when he became an adult, sort of thing. And this really, I mean, I guess if you've been bullied and you've experienced violence and all things like that, you end up becoming, that sort of person. But I should imagine it's based on a sort of true story of the gangs, maybe a bit of gang warfare. So yeah, I quite enjoyed it. I thought it was a little bit too long. I mean, I did find it, even though it was quite a short film, I was thinking, perhaps we could move this on a little bit quicker, because as I say, the scenes where he visits his family and puts a notch on the posts and that, I think was, that they were sort of extended a little bit. They were, because it was like a long walk up. But maybe that was to give you time to think. So, but yeah, I must say that I didn't mind this film. I thought it was quite good. Wasn't what I expected. As I say, I'd probably have to give this a 4. I was trying to work it out. I've been thinking about it past couple of days, and I was thinking, well, maybe only a 3 because of that little bit of length. But thinking about it, having had time to think about it and digest it and all that, I think this is worth a 4.
So it sounds like it actually stayed with you, like stays with you. Yeah,
it stayed me. As I say, I'm still sort of thinking about it, and it came across as I say, like the Borstal times. I mean, I guess it must have been 60s, 70s. It was, I don't know if you've probably never seen the film Scum. I'm sure Sharon's seen Scum.
No, I've
long time ago.
I've heard of it. I've seen posters. Yeah. I've seen clips. I've never seen it.
Yeah. So, but I mean, the Borstal regime was not a particularly nice, caring place. It was, lots of bullying, and you can understand how that can actually, well, I guess someone can become brutalized, and they actually, become quite aggressive and nasty themselves.
It became a byword.
But yeah, no, I'd give this
brutality and bullying.
It did. Yeah. I mean, I've got a little mole here, right? Little mole. And,
Shaun is pointing to his forehead for those who listen to the audio-only version.
I've been asked on 3 occasions. Been asked on numerous occasions. They said, "Oh, what Borstal did you go to?" And I'm like, "Hey, I've never ever been to one." They go, "Oh, because apparently they've got these little dark dot tattoos of somewhat, But anyway, mine's just sort of in my eyebrow. So that was bizarre. I said, "No," I said, "I've never been," But so it just shows you, doesn't it? Really. So.
Yeah. Well, so you never know, Shaun. Maybe.
Anyway,
that might get you out of a couple of scripts. People are like, "Oh, don't mess with him. Oh, he's been to a Borstal."
Yeah, that's
what I was thinking. Maybe I should say that. Yeah.
He can read.
I mean, it is people. Tattoos. Most of the people that have asked me that have been like, should we say? They look dodgy. They look nefarious. Bronk and tank and all that sort. But
yeah.
No, that's an exaggeration. But it's that sort of people that say it. You could imagine. Oh yeah, you probably might have done a few things in your time. So, but yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, like you say, it may get me out of some situation. But it's interesting.
Cool. So Savage.
You'll be looking for that now, won't you? Now, next time you see me, yeah.
That's it. Next time we see Shaun, we're going to be looking for Shaun's ET finger and
his
Shaun's ET finger, his Borstal tattoo. Because okay, now because I'm pretty sure I'm going to cut out the ET finger from this. If anybody is wondering what on earth are they talking about with Shaun's ET finger, I will put a video snippet of this up on our Facebook page and our Twitter page, so you can actually have a look and then you understand what we talk about when we talk about Shaun's ET finger. All right. So, moving on. Now we go to a final film. This is back in Netflix territory. No, they're Netflix and Friends, and this is Des. So, Sharon, you went to see you sat at home and saw something called Des, and you said on ITV Hub, was it?
Yeah, this was an ITV Hub exclusive. So this was a 3-part drama that ITV have commissioned, but instead of it being broadcast on the television first and then going on to the the hub so you could view it catch up. They debuted it straight onto the ITV hub, and they released one episode a night over 3 nights. So I think they're trying to sort of boost their hub audience, as well as maybe trying to promote BritBox. But anyway, Des is a 3-part drama based on the arrest of notorious mass murderer, serial killer, Dennis Nilsen, in the early to mid 1980s. So anyone
this is the David Tennant thing.
David Tennant.
Oh yeah.
David Tennant plays Dennis Nilsen, and Dennis Nilsen, he's, to all his friends, such friends as he didn't have many. He had acquaintances. He was always said, "Call me Des." So that's why it is called Des, because that's how he was identified himself. And basically, Dennis Nilsen was in the late 70s, early 1980s. He was responsible, they believe, for the murder of 15 young men and the attempted murder of 7 or 8 others. And at the beginning, and he was discovered, first of all, when they found human remains clogging up his drains.
Oh, good Lord.
And Dynarod Man came around and was poking about, and he hooked all this stuff out, and he went, "Hello, those look like finger bones. And that looks to me like it could be human flesh." So they call the police in, who would take one look at it and go, "Hello, that looks a bit dodgy to me." So they go out and they say, where does this drain empty into? And basically it says it comes from the top 4 flats. So they go up there and they speak to the householder, and they're immediately aware of a very strong smell, and they talk to him about it. Basically they arrest him on suspicion of murder because they find these body parts, and he says, "No, we know that there are body parts in your house. Can you tell us if there is, how many murders we're looking at here? Is there one they're thinking of 1 or 2, because they found some dismembered body parts." And he says, "Oh, I think about 15." And he admits it more or less straight away that he has been killing these young men. And that's basically where, so the first part is basically when they're investigating the murders. The second part is when they're trying to identify the victims and try to work out what happened to them. And the third part is the trial. And so it's based on the investigation of the murders. Plus, he only had one visitor throughout the entire time he was in prison, the first number of years, and that was his biographer. He wasn't interested, he didn't have any friends. He had family, he had brothers and sisters, but he was estranged from them all. And the only visitor he had was a man he contacted to become his biographer. And so this guy, you see his notes that he took, the copious notes that he took, were based. So this is based on that. And so yes, it looks into the series of killings that were done by Dennis Nilsen, and Dennis Nilsen is played by David Tennant. Extraordinary. He does look. The pictures, you see pictures of the real Dennis Nilsen.
I saw the pictures. I saw that like there was a picture that they had of Dennis Nilsen. They recreated it with David Tennant side by side in like an online article, and it is uncanny. Yeah. It is actually quite scary.
Yeah, because he was Scottish. Dennis Nilsen was Scottish, and so he's changed his natural accent to more of an Argyllshire accent, but he's got the accent there as well. And then you've got Daniel Mays plays the DCI who's investigating it, the Detective Chief Inspector. And then there's various other, and then amazing, I'm trying to think what is, Justin Watkins plays the biographer. And he's always extraordinary in whatever film he's in. He's extraordinary, and he is compulsive in this. And so it deals with the gruesome nature of the crimes, because he would befriend young men, often homeless, often disenfranchised, so they were drug addicts, sometimes they were drunk, sometimes they were just lonely, and also he was homosexual, and so sometimes they would be homosexual, but not always. There was no sort of, he had a type of a certain young man that he was attracted to, and then he would invite them back to his flat, and basically he would strangle them and then keep the bodies for a long time. He'd bathe them, he'd dress them up, he'd sit them around different places in the house, and then when they started to decompose, he then would chop them up into bits. And in the first house, he would burn them in the garden on a bonfire, and he'd disguise the smell with a car tire that was on top.
I'll tell you what, this is a cherry end to the podcast this week.
I know, it's not very good. And then but it did remind me of my policing days, actually. That's why I was drawn to it initially, because I became a civilian in the police in 1987, and was then there for their 26 years. And so I was involved in a number of murder inquiries over those years. We didn't have a lot on the Isle of Wight, to be honest with you. And Dennis Nilsen
that's
was
a whole other
on the Isle of
podcast
Wight for a while. And so I was interested in how because that was the policing world I remember. This was the set in the mid to late 80s in this investigation. And so that was the policing world I remember. So I was interested in that aspect of it, thinking, because we had even though the computers were everywhere else, there weren't computers in the police station until the 90s. So we had manual typewriters, you had paper indexes, you had handwritten everything. And so these big murder inquiries it was handwritten notes, it was typed up on a manual typewriter, and you had a clunky tape recorder if you recorded stuff. And so it's interesting that they had the procedural bit, for me, as recognisable as, this was the policing world I knew in the 1980s. So it was interesting.
How many stars would you give it?
I'd give it again, I think, for the performances, I'd give it a 4. For the subject matter, I don't like to I didn't glamorise it in any way possible. And I don't like to draw attention to murderers. I think you should think of the victims and not the murderer. He's the one who is famous, but they're the victims of it. And so they do give prominence to the innocent victims of this. So I would say the performances are definite 4. But for the whole drama as a whole, I would give it a 3, because still you are drawing attention to a subject matter that I think sometimes these people should be left to die and then they should stay dead and we should forget them.
Yeah. And I agree. It is a dangerous one to do. It is a dangerous one to do. How do you talk about the crime without glorifying the criminal?
Yeah.
So it's like...
but the performances were extraordinary. So, they're all very good. Outstanding.
And it's funny that you were talking about performances. You were talking about Daniel Mays. And I think Daniel Mays is one of those quietly underrated people who makes everything he is in a little bit better. I think he's like Jim Broadbent. I think he's like the modern generation of Jim, who can be dropped into this just completely random sort of films. Fisherman's Friends, to a film about Dennis Nilsen, and into Rogue One. He
does deliver. So I think he's like this generation's sort of Jim Broadbent.
All right, cool. So thank you very much. We have done 3 films at the cinema. We have done 3 films at home. And all that is left is to say who has won this week. Where has our money been better spent? Our money and time. Time, importantly. So, what do you guys reckon? Netflix or cinema this week? Netflix or cinema?
Again, it's a pretty close run thing. I'll probably go, because Sharon did the 3.5, if you're counting the 3.5, I'll have to go with Netflix, I think.
The 3.5 was in cinema.
Yeah. Oh, was it cinema? Oh, right, okay, I'll go cinema then.
Well, I think cinema might just have pipped it.
That 0.5 is the pipper. There is such a word as a pipper.
As the pipper. All right, cool. So we had Bill and Ted Face the Music with 3. We had Black Death with 3, round 1, Dead Heat. We had Broken Hearts Gallery with 3.5. We had The Australian Dream with 4. Netflix pipped it. And then it came down to the final round where we had Savage with 4. And we had Dez with 3. Which means that cinema wins this week with 3.5. And Netflix is just right on its tails with 3.3333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333333. So yes, that is it. And okay, so until next week when we will try and figure out whether we can talk about Mulan or not. We can talk about Mulan. Where Shaun and I might go watch Broken Hearts Gallery at the cinema, and when Shaun, you might go see, what was the other thing that you were saying that you might go see at the cinema with that you were?
Oh, it's a Javier, but I don't know, life less travelled or something like that.
The lives less travelled. That's it. The lives less travelled.
The lives less travelled. Yeah.
I'm gonna try and be like, all posh, posh or whatever, or up myself and go Javier Bardem.
That's it. Javier. Sharon, if you fancy that, I'm pretty good on a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, sort of. Between 4 and 5-ish performances are really good for me because I go straight after work. So if there's one you fancy,
check on what's happening in my domestic realm, and I will let you know about that one. Yeah, but that sounds
interesting. That sounds interesting.
So
domestic.
So if anybody is on the Isle of Wight and wants to go to the Cineworld around that time with Shaun and Sharon, please do that. But until next week, it's a goodbye from me.
And it's a goodbye from me.
And it's a goodbye from me.
We will see you guys next week. Phone home.